as eternal beings, one of the greatest gifts that God's given us is the ability to progress, to get better, to be happier, and to grow closer to Him. And part of that process was coming to this earth, and as such, being able to be agents unto ourselves, basically being able to make our own decisions. And so God gave us that gift to say, I'm going to put you on earth, and you're going to make your own decisions. You're going to do what's best. There's some suggestions I'll give you to make life a little bit easier. We call those commandments. But just in general, you're going to make decisions, and you're going to grow from facing the consequences of those decisions, or from making good decisions and then going on to making better decisions. And obviously, he said, there's going to be mistakes made, and so he provided Jesus Christ for us to be able to pay for our sins, to be able to suffer in the Garden of Gethsemane, and he took upon us his sins. And so he made it possible, even though we'd have sins and kind of distance ourselves from him in doing that there was a way back. But the important part was being able to make our own decisions and face those consequences. And a lot of us might think, well, I'd rather just have everything be good and not have that. Eliminate the pain of this world and just be happy. Well, the problem with that is if you stepped in right now and said, okay, I'm going to step into your life and make all the right decisions for you. You get to have no say in it. I think every single one of us would immediately say, no, I don't want that. It's like a teenager. You step in and say, hey, this is what's best for you. How many times does a teenager listen to us? Not a lot, because they want to be agents unto themselves. We all do. We all want to make our own decisions. And so God granted us that gift, and in order to do so, he has to be hands-off with our decisions. With that, he allowed us to be able to communicate with him and to seek his help through prayer. And one of the biggest things with prayer is to listen to the answers. I think that's one of the hardest things for any of us to do, is to be able to understand those answers. He always hears us and he always answers those prayers, but we a lot of times don't recognize what those answers are. In the Bible, he tells us to ask and it'll be opened up unto us. But also part of those instructions are to hear. The Hebrew word that's used for hear is Shema, which means to listen obediently or to listen intelligently. Not just to hear words, not just to go, I hear you, and then have it dissipate into nothing, but to hear intelligently. So what does that mean? I'm going to give you an example of that. I was teaching a youth group this exact lesson about being able to listen intelligently. And so I started off our lesson, our class, and I had one of those old briefcases, kind of a square one with the 3-number combination locks on it. And so I said, okay, here I am going to teach about hearing answers to prayers, and it's teenagers. And it's like, oh yeah, this is exactly what we want to be listening to. And so I said, I brought something in order to help my lesson be a little bit more interesting to you. And so I opened up this briefcase and I had it filled with candy. And all of a sudden everybody perked up in their chairs and everybody's on the edge of their seat going, oh, okay, this is going to be fun after all. We just don't have to listen to you speak. And so I said, every lesson is better when you have, open up this in front of you. And they all agreed, yes, we're paying attention. And so I said, okay, I'm going to give this to you. And they were very happy about it. And so I shut the case, spun the little numbers, pushed the case back on the desk or the table, and started off with my lesson and taught them this whole lesson. I could tell a lot of times they were listening, but their attention, they're like, oh, they kept wondering what's in that case. We can't wait to get the candy. And so I went through, and I'm going to say it was a half hour that I talked to them. And during that half hour, we talked about things about, communicating with God, and how a lot of times it's like a lifeline to us. Like maybe if you dial 911, that's how you can, it's prayer is the 911 in our lives for seeking God's help. And so then I also talked about the differences between me and them and things I grew up with. And I said, one of the things that was big when I was young were these button-up 501 Levi jeans. That was the big thing. And we laughed about that, the age discrepancy and all that sort of thing. So we got to the end of the lesson, and I said, okay, lesson's over. Who wants to come and get the candy? And someone come up and distribute it to everybody. And so somebody volunteered, rose their hand, and came up to the front of the lesson and the class, and they came up and kind of looked at me like, okay, well, tried it. It's like, well, it's locked. And I said, yeah, just open it up. Go ahead and open it. And he looked at me kind of weird and tried a few things, and it's like, I don't know the combination. And I said, okay. He said, is there anybody else that wants to come up and open it? And they all looked at me like I was the weirdest, dumbest guy in the world. And, well, it's locked. And I said, no, I know, but the candy's in there waiting for anybody that wants to come up and just open this up for everybody. And so we sat there and I let him wait. And it was kind of that awkward silence. And finally, one young man in the back of the room having just his eyes lit up. And he's like, yes, I will open it. And so he came to the front of the class and he gets up there so proud. And he puts, the first number there, he dials it 911. Because that's one of the numbers we talked about. I didn't say, hey, this is the combination to that briefcase. I just had mentioned that number. And then he went over to the other number and put 501 for the 501 genes. I mean, the two numbers that I had mentioned, there were 3 digits during the class. And so he clicked that and click, it opened up. And it was just, it was like, oh, and it was kind of that object lesson of that's the way God works in our lives. We need to listen obediently. We need to hear the message he's trying to give. And he's not trying to give us. He doesn't do it so it's a code that we have to figure out, but it's the way an eternal being communicates with us without taking away our free agency, our desire to do what we want to do in our life. We go to him for help. He provides an answer. And I'm going to say he provides an answer almost every single time. And it's it's up to us to listen to how that is and to listen intelligently and obediently, which means that we will act on what he's going to give us. Because why should he give us an answer if we're not going to act on it? And so that's part of the hearing intelligently, hearing obediently. That's a part of listening to the answers to God's prayers. And like I said in my first video, this is going to be a little bit different in teaching, that I'm going to talk about it with stories that I've had in my life. And the first one I want to tell you about is a time a couple years ago that I was having a tough time and discouraged and down and just my karma was down and I was having a difficult time. And I figured, well, it probably is because I'm not praying as much as I should. And so that night I knelt down and offered my prayers before I went to bed and asked God that I might be able to have a good day the next day, that I was discouraged, I was down, I didn't feel good about myself, I was discouraged about life. Could he please help me? And so that night is in the winter time, it's beginning of winter. I do roofing. I work on commercial roofs. And it's always the thing I hate is when it rains during the night or in the winter when it warms up and the snow is melting. And I pray those first few hours that I'm not going to get that phone call from somebody that's saying, hey, we have a leaky roof. Sure enough, during the night, it warmed up and things started melting. And I got that call first thing in the morning that the roof was leaking. It was still, cold out, but warm enough. It was snow on the ground and whatnot. And so I sat there and my first thought was, that's a fantastic answer to my prayers. Basically, thanks for nothing. How can I pray, make an effort to pray, and the first thing I get is this? I mean, it warms up during the night, and this is the answer to my prayers. The roof that I had to go see was about an hour out of town, and so I jumped in my truck, not happy, drove out to this building, and then sure enough went up on the roof, and it was leaking quite a bit, and it was melting quite a bit because of how warm it had gotten. And so as I sat there and looked around this roof and thought, it's just impossible that it could be leaking, because I had worked on it and redone this building. And I looked and there was an edge that I hadn't done right, and it had fallen open, and the water was just flowing down into the building. And it was about 6 inches long, and it was an edge that was probably about 25 feet long total. And it just happened to break in this one spot and to let the water in. And so I thought, how in the world am I going to fix this? And it was warmed up enough that I went down and bought some materials and supplies that I was going to need. And when I got back up on the roof, it was already melted and drying in this area. And so I checked around and I noticed that, like I said, it was a whole big seam that I hadn't done right. And because it had melted, I was able to fix that whole seam. And it just, everything fixed exactly how I needed to have it fixed. And because of that, a couple things happened. One, it would have been a disaster to get all the way into winter and have the rest of that seam open up and flood that building. And so that was a huge answer to a prayer that I hadn't even offered yet. I also, everything worked out perfectly with the weather. As soon as I fixed that last little bit of seam, it started to rain, and then about an hour later, it started to snow. And so I had a window of 3 hours that was given me that I got up there and was able to fix that seam. And then as I was driving home from this hour-long drive, I realized that I was happy that the work, the satisfaction in getting out there and doing that, and the satisfaction of being able to immediately find what the problem was and realize it could have been a huge problem and a lot worse than I had expected, was taken care of. And so that getting out there and sweating a little bit, I felt happy. And I had received an answer to my prayer. I received an answer in 3 or 4 different forms. I was happy, which was what I asked for. The Lord also saw fit, and in order to provide me happiness, was to be able to provide a solution to a problem that would have come up in the future that would have been major and not just minor like this one was. And I realized that I had to have listened to intelligently. If I would have just been bitter about it and not listened, that the blessing never would have come. And it was a blessing that was more than I thought it was going to be. Another time we were as a family, and we had driven to Seattle, which was about 4 or 5 hours from our home, to go watch a Mariners game, Seattle Mariners baseball. And so it was going to be a family affair, and we jumped in our van and drove over, and it's in Seattle. The stadium's kind of in an industrial area, and so we parked in this big, huge parking lot out in the middle of nowhere in Seattle. Nothing around besides the stadium and shipping yards and all that kind of stuff. And so the game got over kind of later in the evening. We decided not to rush the crowds because we had all night. We didn't have a hotel booked, but we were just going to kind of drive and go see what we could find. And so we shopped around the shops and just meandered. There were us and our 4 kids. There's 6 of us. And we got over to where our van was parked, and most everybody had left by now, and we were able to avoid the crowds, avoid the traffic. I got in and turned the key, and absolutely nothing happened. And so I thought, oh, and obviously the battery had died. So being out in the middle of nowhere, kind of that first shock of, what do you do? So I saw just off in the distance, a taxi was driving by on one of the side streets. And so I kind of jumped out of the van and didn't have jumper cables, but I ran as fast as I could to kind of head him off, and got over to the taxi and said, is there any way that you could give me a jump? And he said, yeah, they charge for that. So I was like, that's fine. So went over and he hooked up his jumper cables, and we sat there and charged the battery and had the jumper cables on it, gave it a few minutes, and then tried it, and absolutely nothing. The battery was completely dead. He said, you just have a bad battery. And I was like, well, okay. I said, can you take us to a hotel or something? He said, no, I can't. There's 6 of you. It's just a normal cab. I don't have the seat belts. I can't get you in here, let alone suitcases, because we had we were going to stay the night. So all 6 of us had suitcases, and then 6 of us, and then he was driving something that would fit 4 people with a few suitcases. And so he left, and he we got that sick feeling of, oh no, we're out in the middle of nowhere. What do you do? And I thought, I'll tell you what you do. We're going to pray, and it's going to teach my kids the power of prayer. I know this is God working in my life. This is going to be fantastic, because they're going to see you pray and a miracle happens, and all of them will just go, oh, yes. So I offered a prayer, a very, very heartfelt prayer out loud with all of them in the van. And so I was positive that I was going to then put the key in, and it was going to turn up, because this will be the greatest learning experience. My kids are going to be devout Christians from now on, because they're going to see the power of prayer. And I turned the key over, and nothing. And so I thought, okay, what do you do now? And I thought, I got it. I've got a secret weapon. I've got a little 5-year-old girl in the car. I'll have her pray. God will not say no to a 5-year-old girl, an innocent little girl who's asking from the depths of her heart to be able to have this happen. And I thought, if it's good to have a 5-year-old pray, let's have everybody pray, just in case maybe he can say no to a 5-year-old. So we went through the van, and all of us took turns offering a prayer out loud that God would grant us a miracle and have that van start. And when all of us got done praying, if you'd asked me right then, how sure are you that this miracle is going to happen? 90 to 100% sure. I just know it. I'm faithful. I'm a righteous individual. I've got kids back here. We're kind of in a dangerous part of town. And so I turned the key, and nothing. It was as dead as it ever was. And so now we're getting desperate. I'm thinking, I don't even know what to do. There's nowhere to walk. We're in a bad area in the middle of nowhere. In fact, it was so bad that we looked over on the side street by this time, and there was a policeman over there. And I thought, okay, well, I'm going to go over there and ask him, what do I do? And so I walked over, and they had somebody across the hood with handcuffs on. And here comes this doofus guy in the middle of the night. I think by this time it's 12 or 1 in the morning. And I was, excuse me. And he turns around, not knowing what I'm doing there. I said, what? I said, hey, my car's broken down. He said, well, call AAA. And I was like, I don't know how that works. And so he said, well, I can't really do anything. I said, well, after I'm done arresting this guy, or the other policeman that was there, we'll take him away, and I'll come over and I'll jump the car for you. Maybe I can help with that. I said, well, we tried and that won't work. And he said, well, the only thing I can tell you is don't leave anything in your car, because it will be stolen. Anything in your car will be taken out. If you lock it, leave it open. If you lock it, they'll break the windows. So just take everything out and unlock the car. Which I thought, okay, that's even better news now. And so I walked back over to the car in sheer desperation, and sat there and just thought, I don't know what to do. We've offered prayers. We've done that route. I've done everything as an intelligent person I thought of that I could do. And by this time, another taxi was driving by the side road, and I thought, that's the only thing I can do is to go grab him. And so I ran over there, and it was the friendliest guy from Jamaica that you can ever imagine. How can I help you, man? And I said, my family's in the car over there. I said, problem is, I would ask you for a ride, but there's 6 of us, and I know your taxi won't, because the other taxi driver was adamant. Oh, no. And I said, he's like, no. Let's drive you over there, and we'll get you in the car. I'll fit you in. And so he jammed us all in there like sardines and packed our luggage up on the back of this car, on this taxi. So happy about it. He says, where do you want to go? And that was one of the first blessing, is that he was so happy and so positive. And it kind of relieved what I was going through. And he says, where do you want to go? And I said, to a hotel. But we've called a few of them. Nikki was doing that while I was out running around asking police how to survive. And I said, well, we've called and there's none available. And he says, you know what? I just dropped somebody off at a hotel, and I'm pretty sure they had 1 room available. Let's go. We'll get you over there. So we jump in the car and we drive and we drive and drive and drive. Kind of worried how far we're going, but we get over there and go into the hotel, and sure enough, they have 1 room left. And it was such a relief. And so we went into the hotel room and got everybody situated. Worked out very well. Everyone was comfortable. Went to sleep for the night. Woke up in the morning. I woke up first bright and early and realized that, okay, we still had a car a long ways away that needed something done to it. I was assuming a battery. So we weren't out of the woods yet, but 1, I had to find a battery, and 2, I had to get back there. And so I woke up early and walked out the door of the hotel room, or the lobby of the hotel. Walked out and looked over to my left, and we were right beside a Sears Auto Care. And so they were just opening up, and I walked in, and I don't even think they were officially open yet. The guy was just unlocking the doors and said, I'm looking for a battery. He says, I can do that for you. I've got one. Give me the name of what your make of your car and all that. Bought a battery, no fuss, no muss, carrying this heavy battery, and walk out and thought, okay, I have a battery now. How do I get the 30 miles back to my car? And as I'm walking out with my battery, there in front of me in the parking lot of the Sears store was a taxi. And so I walk up to the taxi, and the taxi driver is asleep in the car. And I kind of tap on the window lightly, not to scare him. And he kind of wakes up. And I said, are you in service? Or is there? He says, no, yes, by all means, jump in. And so we got in the taxi, and where do you want to go? And I told him. He drove me right down there. I told him what was going on. And he said, well, I actually have tools in my bag, which I hadn't even thought about. He said, do you need some tools? And I was like, oh, yeah, I don't have a wrench to undo the batteries. He says, no, I have a toolbox. You can use it. In fact, I'll help you put the battery in. And so he put the battery in, and sure enough, got it in, and it started right up, and I went and got my family. And so the point being is, it wasn't the answer that I was expecting, but it was a perfect answer for recognizing the things that God had put in front of me to be able to answer my prayer. I think a lot of times we want that. We want that miracle. We want God to step in and take care of it, and he can't. Because he's bound. He's bound to let us be able to grow. He knows that if we don't push through and overcome obstacles and figure things out on our own, that we won't grow. Or if we went to, and a lot of times it's kind of our nature to always go to him just with the major problems. That, okay, this disaster is happening in my life, God, I need you in my life. And then we get mad because it doesn't work out the way we thought it would. But then every other time, just on a daily basis, we're not seeking his advice. And it's not, I don't think he does it, and I don't think he ever says, I'm not answering your prayers because this is the first time you've prayed. I think the problem arises is that we don't recognize the answers that he's freely giving because we haven't listened. Just like the suitcase, we haven't recognized what the answer is. One of my favorite scriptures is in John, and it kind of speaks to why I am a Christian. I hear a lot of people get caught up with the, they want to be caught up in the rapture, or they want to, be saved, and it's the future. I'm doing this because I want to go to heaven. I don't want to go to hell. It's a heaven or hell type situation, and it almost creates that animosity. I'm good, you're bad. The reason I'm Christian and love living the gospel of Jesus Christ is for the things it does for me in this life, the happiness it brings me in this life. Sure, I want to go to heaven. That's my goal. But for right now, I just need some sort of peace and happiness in my life. And so in John chapter 14, verse 27, God promises us, peace I leave with you, my peace I give unto you, not as the world giveth, give I unto you. He promises us peace, but not as the world gives. What does that mean? I think peace that the world provides is the immediate answer. Whether it's money. I need money. God, give me money. That's the way the world would take care of our problems. God, I need to be healed. And, just make this happen. That's the way the world does it. What God promises us is peace. There's a lot of situations in this life that we'll be seeking, that we want answers for something that's very important to us, our health, the health of somebody else. But we need to take into account the eternal principles of things. I don't know the answers to everything. I don't know why sometimes people are healed and sometimes they're not, other than what's the big picture. We might pray for someone to be healed, but do the things that we learn and grow from that sickness and that loss, do they cement our relationships for the eternities? Do they teach us greater love? Do they teach us greater love for that person or that bond that we develop? And would we be willing to give that up for the eternities to have immediate satisfaction in this life? And I don't think so. What are the prayers of that individual? What are the things that they're learning? It's never easy. And I think that's why the Lord promises us the peace that he gives, not what the world provides. One of my favorite sections in the scriptures is when Christ is suffering in the Garden of Gethsemane, and he's taken upon our sins. And that starts to come upon him. And he starts to have that experience of what that pain is, to take upon our sins, our sicknesses, our worries, our frustrations. He didn't only take upon us our sins, he took upon us everything that we suffer in this world. And that started to come upon him in the Garden of Gethsemane. And he sat there and prayed. He said the first things out of his mouth were, God, let this cup pass before me. I think as he realized the anguish that he was going through, the pain, even he didn't comprehend how intense and horrible it was going to be. And he asked that he might not have to go through that. But he said, nevertheless, thy will be done. God knew that what he was suffering was for the greater good. It was going to be the benefit for all of us. And that suffering would be there for just a little bit. And he'd be there to buoy him up. But he couldn't take it from him. And he didn't. And Christ suffered those things. And thank goodness he did, because of his suffering that allows us all to return to him and to return to him as families. And so there's things that we're going to be asked to suffer in this life. And for the greater good, we pass through those things. And in the meantime, there's lots of other things that answers to prayers that God is very willing to give us. We just have to recognize that. Recognize his hand, his answers, and the peace will always come. I promise you that. Have a blessed day. Thanks.